الجلسة الدكتور مارشال بريدينج، ويشارك أيضا الدكتور صالح المسند والأستاذ إلياس الرابحي والأستاذ غالب مسعود والأستاذ عبد الله السليماني. سوف نبدأ بالدكتور مارشال بريدينج، وهو استشاري ومتخصص في تقنية المعلومات، وفي أيضا تقنية الحديثة للمكتبات، ويصدر العديد من النشرات عبر المؤسسات التنظيمية وعبر الأمريكان لايبراري أسوسيشن، وله مشاركات أيضا كبيرة على الصعيد الأمريكي والأوروبي في تكنولوجيا المكتبات. سوف نبدأ به ليحدثنا حقيقة عن ما تواجهه المكتبات من صعوبات في قضية إدارة المعرفة، وفي السبل الكفيلة لتحقيق التنمية المستدامة من خلال ما يملكه من خبرة ومعرفة في هذا المجال. دكتور Marshall, we will start with you at the first, and you can explain, to us, how can we manage our library and what kind of difficulties that we are facing now dealing with the library technology and the environment of information. You can speak from here if you want.
Are these on now? So I'm delighted to have the chance to come and speak with you today here in Tunisia. Many of you I have met before in some of my other travels in the Arab world, through the SLA, AGC meetings, through conferences I've been to in Beirut and Jordan and so forth. So delighted to see some familiar faces here and to learn and to meet many new colleagues. So the topic of this conference, as has been explained to me, is kind of more sustainability and technology, and can interpret that in a lot of different ways. We heard in the opening remarks yesterday kind of an ecological, environmental approach to sustainability. That's incredibly important as we think about future generations and how the environment will be left for them. In terms of technology, I look at sustainability kind of in some practical terms. Before I get started, let me kind of say that, what I want to try to do is kind of reflect some of the experiences that I have had with technology as I constantly am gathering it, both for the publications that I write and in the opportunities that I have to speak in various parts of the world. So I consider myself privileged to have been able to visit some of your countries in Asia, Latin America. I've been in India twice this year. So from each of those travels, I have opportunities to speak with librarians and see libraries and how they're carrying out their important work using technology to support their institutions, their communities, and so forth. So I feel like I learn as much from you and your colleagues around the world as I'm able to reflect back to you. I hope I'm able to say something useful, but again, I see myself more as the vehicle. I collect information and I try to reflect it back to the communities that I speak to. And it's kind of what I do in my life. I've been fortunate to be able to have a lot of different platforms for communicating information about technologies in libraries and different contexts. One of them is my website, Library Technology Guides. I try to put as much information as possible there for anyone to just go and get. including me. As I have my various deadlines for articles and that kind of thing, I can always kind of go back and kind of look at data that I accumulate in my website, automation systems that libraries use in different parts of the world and so forth, and just different news releases, all this kind of data that I stash there all the time. So when I have to write about a given topic, it's kind of there at my disposal, and it's there for yours as well. I always like to mention that one component of my website is a directory of libraries around the world, and I want to make sure that I have a good understanding of the systems that are used, in the different communities I speak to. So I certainly invite you to look and see if your libraries are in my directory and give me new information about that. Another platform that I have is this industry report that I write every year. I've just concluded the 2019 version of that will be published in the May issue of American Libraries. It'll be available online, and that's where you can kind of see my observations about what's happening in the world of technology, library systems, discovery systems, and so forth in the last year. So again, it's a privilege to be able to kind of write this annual report. Kind of brings me to the topic I have that I want to talk about a few minutes today. I have a few minutes this morning. I understand we have a panel this afternoon. Maybe we'll have more time to explore some of these issues after lunch as well in the afternoon. So when I think about sustainability, there are a lot of opportunities to start a project, but how do you ensure that it will endure? That this will be something that will have the resources, the interest by a community to use it, and not languish. So, I think those are important things to think about at different steps along the process. Certainly at the beginning of a process, but even when you think about the Arabic Union Catalog, that's been around quite some time. This is the 9th year of this meeting. That what do you need to think about in order to kind of take it forward to the next step and the step beyond that, to make sure that it continues to be in tune with the needs of those who make use of it. Certain things are done; they're very solid. Are there other things that could become part of the initiative that are consistent with the way that technology is going and the way that libraries are changing globally? As a technologist, that's the view that I look at a lot of these projects, trying to make sure that technologies have changed fundamentally 3 or 4 times in the course of my short career, from mainframes to client servers to web-based computing to cloud computing. Those phases of technology are important to pay attention to as libraries think how we're going to deliver our content and our services to our users. So change is fundamental. Change in technology is fundamental. Change in communities, society, and libraries are all things that we have to plan around. So in order to achieve sustainability, you've got to look at a lot of different moving parts. And how do you, the interesting thing about technology is it gets more powerful and cheaper every year. So, that works in our favor. The complexity of change kind of makes it hard to apply technology in order to kind of continue a successful mission of any given project. And then a lot of it is organizational. What are the needs of the organization that's supporting it? What are the resources that are being brought forward to the project and so forth? You have the people, the technical experience and so forth that are going to be available throughout this whole lifetime of a project. And a lot of good projects kind of go on indefinitely. You don't have an end date in mind for a project such as the Arabic Union Catalog. It's an enduring resource. And how do you ensure that it's not only enduring, but increases its impact and success as the world changes around us? So as I've been looking at this topic, and as I consider the realm of technology in general, there's some pretty profound changes that are happening in recent times. I'll talk more about the idea of shared infrastructure. The day of individual computing is kind of waning. A single server serving a single organization for a single application is giving way to large groups of institutions sharing platforms in ways that present opportunities for collaboration that aren't possible when you have this narrow, siloed view of the way that you implement software and technology. That's a fundamental change from the earlier days of library automation in the early and mid parts of my career. So again, this fundamental change in technology toward cloud computing is something to pay attention to. The rest of the world is. I'm often asked, are libraries ahead or behind the world when it comes to technology? A lot of times I feel like we're a little bit behind, because we're limited in resources. We don't have the kinds of resources and people and engineers that organizations that drive technology like Google and Facebook and Amazon will never be at that level. But I think it's important to kind of ride the waves that they start in order to make sure that we're current enough in the way that we're able to implement technology so that we're able to, in the best way possible, support the needs of our communities. So cloud computing is something I talk a lot about lately. And environmentally sustainable, again, that's an important topic. And I think they kind of go hand in hand. The least efficient way to deliver computing these days is on a single server or computer. Not only do you get better collaboration, but it's also kind of more efficient in the way that it uses energy when you're really participating in highly distributed, highly efficient data centers that each of which is probably following much better environmentally sustainable practices than could ever be done by small institutions operating a smaller set of data centers and servers. So it's incredible to see kind of large data centers that are mostly supported through solar energy and so forth. So, you can do that at a large scale. It's hard to do that at small scale. And then the strategically sustainability, where is the organization and the resources able to support it in the future? And of course, I think about this in both the physical and the digital world. The Arab Unit Catalog is generally a collaborative digital project. How do you collect and aggregate and provide access to the metadata for all of the books published in Arabic? That's an amazing project, a very successful project. But then how do you also achieve sustainability in the print world? So, I've had the chance to work with some kind of very large shared facilities for storage of books. So, it comes into play there, and I find that aspect of libraries interesting as well. I'm not of the view that libraries will ever become all digital, that we will be dealing with hybrid libraries for the long-term future, where print and digital and other types of media and formats will coexist in our collections and be part of our services, and it will never get more complicated. Holograms, or who knows what other types of materials will be part of library collections, 20, 30, 100 years from now. So be flexible in the way that we think of libraries, and they're never going to be just one thing. A big part of what I think about as far as successful use of technology in the next phase of automation and technology and librarianship is increased opportunities for libraries to engage with partners in deep collaboration, as I sometimes call it, where you can do a lot more together than you can by yourself. That standalone systems have been the model of automation technology in libraries for the first, 10, 20, 30 years of the history of automation. But I see that changing quite a bit now in other parts of the world. And I understand and observe that changes happen in some global regions at different times than others, and I'm very sensitive to that. And I never try to prescribe that, things ought to change in a certain way, but I observe that things change in one region, to follow a certain set of trends, and those trends usually kind of happen at other times in other parts of the world. So I think it's kind of my job to convey, this is a big change that's happening in the world around us. What do you think about those kinds of changes applied in your context? So again, try not to be prescriptive about the way that I describe the trends. But the trend that I'm seeing is kind of increasing opportunities to use shared infrastructure for technology in order to achieve goals of deep collaboration that libraries really need to do. Libraries, anywhere I go, don't have the resources to do everything by themselves and for themselves. We live in a time where the amount of information that we're asked to manage is ever more vast when we don't get the resources in proportion to that. So how do we do more with less? A big part of that has to do with working with our peers and partners and using technology in order to enable that collaboration to take place in successful and efficient ways. It provides a lot of organizational benefits when you don't have to do everything yourself. You're able to use specialists that you have in some areas and rely on specialists that your peers have in others. No library can have catalogers, for example, that can work in every language. Isn't it great if you can say, well, we'll take care of this one and you'll take care of that one? So I see a lot of opportunities for that. So the result of that is what I call higher impact for the users of library systems. You're able to provide access to larger collections with deeper cataloging and just kind of more content than any library could manage to do on its own. So I think I'm, saying things that you already agree with by virtue of you being here in support of this very wide collaborative project. But there are opportunities to think about that and other aspects of the way that you use technologies in your libraries back home as well. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. The last point on this slide is kind of this fundamental shift in computing away from standalone to shared infrastructure. Just seeing so many examples of that play out in the world. And yours is the first example that I mentioned today. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. You're familiar with OCLC and other kinds of organizations that not only provide cataloging but interlibrary loan services, but also involvement increasingly in library management systems and digital library systems, discovery services, and so forth. So, these were next steps that OCLC has moved into on a global level. What are there additional services that make sense in the context of the Arab catalog? I'm also seeing an increasing number of libraries banding together, whether they're part of a very large multi-campus university system or whether they're independent libraries working together in a consortium. That is the way of the world now. I see a lot of movement as reflected in the last library systems report toward libraries banding together that previously had separate automation systems to say, we're going to do this time we're going to do it together with our partners. So that's a pretty major shift. It makes for interesting dynamics in the library technology industry. It means it's more of a winner-take-all when it comes to what vendors and products ultimately succeed in the marketplace. And then I mentioned earlier that, shared print facilities of print materials is also an important trend that I'm seeing in the world. I had the privilege to work with the RECAP facility, which is shared by New York Public Research Libraries, Princeton University, Columbia, and now Harvard, for a 20 million volume facility to efficiently manage and provide access to print materials. So just seeing that play out on a large scale has been very interesting in what I've worked on lately. So, these models of computing have a lot to do with what we're able to do in libraries in order to be able to collaborate and work on projects in more sustainable ways. And it's not all or nothing. I'm seeing this gradient of change. It's happening over time, and there are different ways to accomplish some of the shared infrastructure, resource sharing, and large-scale projects that I've alluded to, ranging from the least collaborative, the least efficient of these standalone systems, moving to distributed networks of interconnected standalone systems until you finally get to an environment of truly shared infrastructure. Again, so I kind of repeat the point often in many talks that I give, that the days of standalone computing are waning. That it's not the way that we use technology in other settings. That when we use Facebook or Google, Amazon, whatever kind of the social network, consumer product, and business environments, it's all based on very highly shared technology and infrastructure. We say up in the cloud. When we use our phone to access things, that is the model of computing that I think libraries need to emulate. So I have a lot of details that I can talk about. How do you move from kind of being self-contained to global, and then how do you start developing new types of workflows in order to be able to collaborate more efficiently. I'm just going to go through a couple of more slides. I know I only have 20 minutes this morning, and I could probably talk to you for 2 hours, but I know there are others who need a chance to speak. But we need to move into an environment of computing. Not all at once, these are more planning issues than things you will go home and do tomorrow. But what are you thinking about as far as kind of the next generation of technology support for the libraries that you're working with? A lot of computing is done, locally. Are there opportunities for libraries to kind of hand off a lot of the infrastructure support to vendors, to other hosting arrangements, as we evolve into the realm of software as a service, where essentially you point your web browser or your phone to whatever functionality it is that you want to use and make use of that. So software as a service is kind of the modern and current model of computing that I think that we're working toward. So collaborative infrastructure, I think, is the way of the world that we need to aspire to now, where it allows you to do more on the service level and on patron and staff and customer-facing technology, and worry less about the plumbing of technical infrastructure behind the scenes, where you and your peers can collaborate together to share systems. That is a proven way of implementing technology today, as opposed to each university, each library doing it themselves. And it doesn't mean that it all becomes homogenized. You're able to move into this more shared model of computing, preserving the branding of your institution and your library, to be able to follow your own business rules and practice. They're designed to be flexible. It doesn't mean that you don't have to make compromise. I'm not going to go into the later slides. I think I'll probably stop pretty soon now. But the main obstacle to collaboration can be rigidity when it comes to local practice. We've always done it this way. We like, this way of building our records. Our cataloger says that this is the best way to do this particular thing. How do we as global communities come to agreement on practice in ways that allow us to cooperate more efficiently? So I know some of the painful implementations of shared systems have been more on those issues. How do we come to agreement on ways that we can actually collaborate better so that we can have collections of higher impact and be able to work more efficiently? And so the question that I kind of present here, because your situations are different than a lot of the library systems that I work with, where they're kind of together. All of the public universities in California, the community colleges in California, the universities in South Carolina that have opted to have shared systems, they're not geographically dispersed in the way that all of your libraries are. So how do you explore opportunities for collaboration when you are geographically distant? You have already accomplished that when it comes to the Union Catalog of shared metadata. Are there opportunities to do that in other aspects of the way that you manage your physical and digital collections? So I think I'll leave you with that question and then turn the program back over to our other speakers this morning. And I look forward to talking with you more this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marshall.